been pretty distracted lately.
Okay.
So just sniffing everything. I noticed too, as soon as we get back to like kind of the route that we always take, she chills out of it.
Yeah.
It's like anytime we go to a new spot, she's just like sniff, sniff, sniff.
He's pretty good as long as I have that clicker.
Yep.
Like,
Same. Like whenever I didn't have it functioning right,
Yeah.
it was like I would say no, and she would like look at me and just like keep pulling. And I was
Yep.
and usually it's just like one buzz, and then
Yep.
Yeah.
he's fine for the rest.
Yep, and that's typically pretty common as far as what you'll see. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind with all this kind of stuff, you know, behavior in general is contingent on reinforcement, right? Whether that's obviously e-collar, right, and us giving corrections, whether that's we're using food and reinforcing something, everything is contingent on reinforcement. So if you take any of that reinforcement away preemptively before the dogs have really created this like habitual response to just listening to you guys, you're gonna see it all fall apart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is why we usually say like that first month or so, it's just so important just to stay super diligent on things, you know, and expect them to make the mistakes so that you can correct for them. And, you know, then in her case, right, if the collar is functioning, obviously I know you've had some issues with just the equipment working, obviously, but when it is working, you know, if you go on that new walk and she's just like, no, I'm distracted, I'd rather do this, you have to make sure, obviously, one, you're persistent about things, and two, your motivation is appropriate, where she cares more about it than trying to do that thing, right? Because all that is, excuse me, is the husky and her testing that boundary, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, well, like that correction wasn't that bad. Let me keep trying to sniff here, right? So we got to make sure that she obviously cares more about that than whatever it is that she's trying to do, you know? So that's really the key with it. And then, you know, a constant conversation I'm having with clients is just not rushing too quickly into the state of mind of like, okay, they're trained, so we just like, just do it. You know what I mean? It's you're constantly training when you go in those situations, right? Walking, for example, there's never going to be a time you go for walks and don't use the e-collar, you know what I mean? Like when I take my dogs for walks, I still use the e-collar to this day with them, you know? And I don't really need to use it that much, and there's definitely been times I have taken them without the e-collar and they're fine, but that's because I'm 99% of the time so consistent about that, you know, that like they know what the expectation is on the walk, they don't really test that boundary, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
90 days from before.
Yeah, no, good to hear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just don't get too, you know, pushing the boundaries with things without the e-collar and stuff like that. Just really keep in mind, it's going to be a little while before they really got this. You know what I mean? And as long as you're consistent about that, then, you know, you'll see them continue to progress with it. And that's where you'll start seeing that they just get better and better with, you know, obviously listening whether or not they have the e-collars on. But even with my dogs, again, if they don't have their e-collars on, I try to just avoid asking them to do anything. Because we say I'm better off. Now, case in point right there, that's a good example of any time that once we put her in a position, right, if she makes that mistake, that should be a correction there. Because right there, we're starting to deteriorate things where before, like when I came to the house, for example, last time, right, and she held that bed stay perfectly, right, and maybe needed one correction for breaking it, but she was rock solid with it, right? The second we start falling into the trap of just reminding them as opposed to correcting when they make those mistakes, it ruins all that, where they start realizing that, oh, I could get up until mom tells me to get back into it. Right? So try to stay consistent about when you're given those commands, following through with that correction, right? If they don't listen to it. But yeah, I was saying, it's better to just not ask them to do anything and let them be a little wild than it is to ask them to do something when you're not in a position and enforce it and teach them to blow you off. Right? So keep that in mind, obviously. It's all about the environment, you know, it's all about how we socialize them. That's really what it comes down to. There's so many dogs out there, like some of the most social dogs you'll meet, that in the right recipe of things going on, like an issue will happen, you know? So it's all about setting them up for success with this kind of stuff and just being aware that they're animals, you know? This is, you know, stuff's gonna happen, and, you know, you just learn to understand your dog better and what they need to be successful with it.
when they were here, did they socialize with like more than one dog at a time, or did y'all?
We did small groups. I think I did like 2 or 3 at a time a couple times, but for the most part, there's not very many situations you guys are ever going to need to socialize them in like a large group, you know? So I try to focus on just really small controlled groups that are going to be like good fits for them.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's like my sister has 3 dogs.
Yeah.
And then like a couple of our friends who get together, like
Sure.
they all have a dog, but then we're all there, so
Yeah.
there's like a group of dogs.
Yeah, I think we might have talked about this a little bit last time. You just got to be careful with those kind of situations. I tend to stay away from like the mass dog gatherings.
Yeah.
You know, like we got some friends that same deal, like all of them have dogs and they all get together and it's like there's 6 dogs and like 12 people and like, you know, there's just so much happening and it's just typically not productive for anybody. And the risk of something happening in those situations is so much higher. I don't see it worth it, you know? That's a different story. Like I said, if you got one friend that's got a dog, they want to come over, socialize for a little bit or something, or, you know, in your sister's case with her little group and yours, you know, that's a different story. But I would probably be avoiding the big dog gatherings. And even that for now, until you guys really start to trust him socially, I would like, we're going to like in the next like 3 or 4 minutes, like wrap this up anyways, you know, keep them short and sweet, you know, let them have some fun and on a really productive note, you know, because the other mistake a lot of people make is they go way too long. It's like they do it for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then like, you know, he had a ton of fun and then he just gets over it. Right. And then he's over it, but the other dog keeps coming back and it's like, nobody's seeing it because like we're distracted at that point. And it's like, you know, then a problem happens. So.
Yeah. At the beach.
You know, there's ways to make that go successfully. Like once you guys get closer to whenever that's actually going to happen, we could talk about that. But you know, house guests, like we same deal. Have some people that it's like a family member is going to stay with them for a week or something, and they're bringing a dog with them. And I would say you just gotta be careful with it because like if you take 2 dogs and you just add another dog into their life, right? That's just suddenly living with them and doing all of the same things and eating and meal times and nighttime. There's so many more variables that are very unnatural. Now, in a case like this, Sonny, no. Good. So sometimes what I'll do, like as I'm getting ready to end the social, is I'll test and make sure that I still have the attention where I need it. So right there I said Sonny, right? He was still doing what he was doing, so I gave a correction for that to make sure I can disengage him very, very quickly if I need to. And again, level-wise, that was a 75 that I just corrected at there. You see how much higher that is than what we normally work at and how little of a response we got out of him, right? So be aware of that and don't be shy, you know, with those higher levels in situations like this to set those tones.
Okay.
Looks good. They're doing great. A little bit more consistent on just holding them to a little higher of a standard. Commands look good though once we started cruising with them. And socialization, I would definitely recommend starting to try to socialize a little bit. Just 1 dog at a time, super short, 30 minutes or so, nice and productive, you know. Just get your guys' selves comfortable with doing it a little bit. And obviously just make sure you know the other dog. That's the key with it, is like that's a very social friendly dog, you know. So like I don't have anything to worry about with that dog, so I could really keep my attention on my dogs at that point, right?
Okay, so my dad has a dog. It's like
what determines friendly social dog?
They seem like it's an old dog.
Yeah.
There's like snaps at Sunny, but Sandy just ignores them.
Yeah.
They just ignore each other. But
Yeah.
occasionally we have my ex-wife's dog, which is a Chihuahua.
Sure.
Who again, Sunny ignores them.
Yeah.
But the Chihuahua kind of
Pushes her buttons.
Yep.
pushes Kaya's buttons.
And she'll take it for a day or 2.
Yeah.
And then it turns into fights.
Okay, so generally speaking, right, my rule when it comes to socializing dogs is I will only ever put one, what I refer to as supervised dog, in a group at a time, right? Meaning Sonny in my eyes is the supervised dog, right? He's fine, right? But again, under the right circumstances could present a problem, right? Kaya's fine. She would be a social dog in my mind, right? Luna, social dog in my mind. Social to me means under 99% of circumstances, there's not going to be a problem with this dog. Again, they're animals. There can be a problem at some point, but under 99% of situations, there's not going to be a problem, right? So knowing that, knowing the other dog is a supervised dog also, right? At least with the Chihuahua, it sounds like. I personally would not put Kaya in that dog, Sonny and that dog together. right? Because again, like if that dog's getting crotchety towards him and then he decides he has a problem with that because he has a history of having issues, right? That can turn into a bad situation, right? I caveat all of that with, you know your dogs. You know those dogs better than me, right? So you have to use your best judgment with that kind of stuff. Regardless if you're going to socialize them, though, everything comes down to the environment in which we're socializing them in, right? Especially when it comes to little dogs and stuff like that. So many times they're all over the furniture, they're in your lap, they're here, they're there, and it makes them 10 times more likely to react and stuff, where if you just nix all of that stuff when they're socializing, usually that dog is 10 times better, right? So, you know, use your best judgment with it, right? I play, like when it comes to socialization and stuff, I play it really safe with that kind of stuff, you know? But I'm understanding that sometimes you have a family member that has a dog, and it's like, we got to get these two dogs to get along and stuff, and you just supervise it a little extra closely at that point, you know? So, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, something totally